We owe a debt of gratitude to all those people who exposed themselves to risk yesterday, to those who will do so tonight, tomorrow and in the future. I have a responsibility now to them to make sure that they get what they need, and I am determined to fulfil those duties. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State, James Cartley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Defence Secretary for the advance side of his statement and begin by welcoming him to his new post. The Secretary of State had a distinguished military career and as Security Minister will have had a foretaste of the operational demands of his new job. I will be turning to the circumstances that brought him to that position shortly, but we wish him well in his position. Can I also welcome the new Minister for Veterans to his post and welcome his predecessor to her new role as Armed Forces Minister. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also pay personal tribute to the previous Secretary of State. On the day he resigned, I said he was an honourable man who had done an honourable thing, and I meant it. Whatever our political differences, I respect the dignity with which he left government on a point of principle in the national interest. On the seizure of the Russian Shadow Fleet vessel, the opposition welcomes this action and the way it was conducted. Throughout his time in office, the previous Secretary of State and I maintained a rock-solid consensus in support of Ukraine, standing shoulder to shoulder against the Russian threat. Whenever he announced action against Russian naval activity in our territorial waters, such as against Yantar, I welcomed it because we must stand strong against the serious threat posed by Putin. That's why it's important that this vessel was seized, but I do have one particular concern. It was back in March when the Prime Minister announced that British armed forces are now able to board sanctioned vessels that are passing through our waters. But since then, the BBC reports that in at least 94 instances, Shadow Fleet vessels crossed into UK territorial waters without a single one being interdicted by our armed forces. So until this weekend, almost 3 months after the policy was announced, no boarding of these vessels had taken place. What changed? On the specific action that took place, I pay tribute to all our brave armed forces and law enforcement personnel involved who conducted their mission to the highest professional standards. Because one thing is certain about those who serve in our military: give them the kit and they will do the job. But here is where the problem lies. This operation was necessary as part of our overall policy to deter Russia. However, that attempt at deterrence has been completely undermined by the total debacle of the Defence Investment Plan. Last week, we witnessed an unprecedented moment in UK defence, the likes of which has never been seen before, with the Secretary of State, his deputy and 2 PPSs all resigning in total and unprecedented chaos. The Defence Secretary resigned from government because the money the Prime Minister was offering for the Defence Investment Plan was so meagre that it would, and I quote, make the country less safe and reduce the readiness of our forces and increase the risk to personnel on operations. That is a shattering verdict on this government's plans for defence, and it was one shared by the former Armed Forces Minister. Now, for some reason, he didn't get a mention in the Secretary of State's statement or in the response from his junior minister earlier. But as we are talking about the actions of our Royal Marines, let me put on record my huge respect for the former Minister for the Armed Forces and the way in which he too resigned on a matter of principle. We share a passion for delivering the drone revolution, and given his distinguished military record, it was damning for him to say that the Defence Investment Plan was, and I quote, not built for the threat we face. It is neither transformative enough nor sufficiently funded. In particular, in his resignation letter, the previous Armed Forces Minister stated that the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill is unfit for purpose. We agree 100%. Just as the professionalism of our personnel was at the heart of this weekend's interdiction operation, standing by our veterans and serving personnel must be at the heart of defence policy. So as a veteran of Operation Banner himself, does the Secretary of State agree that the last thing the government should be doing is hounding former soldiers through the courts? If he agrees, will he therefore urge the Prime Minister to scrap the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill? On the core issue of funding, it will be deeply worrying for our allies in NATO to see the chaos now surrounding the Defence Investment Plan. Meant to transform our armed forces, the very Secretary of State responsible for delivering the DIP until 5 days ago said it will make us less safe. That's because the money on offer was nothing like enough. So is it true that the Prime Minister is refusing to give the Secretary of State any more cash for the Defence Investment Plan? If so, in principle, does he welcome the offer from the Leader of the Opposition to work with the Government to find the welfare savings to fund defence? To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, as this is our first exchange at the dispatch box since his appointment, can I assure the Secretary of State that we are willing to work with him in the national interest to find the money for defence? Will he work with us?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State for his welcome. I was pleased to have the opportunity to speak to him on Friday evening. I do want to work constructively with him and colleagues on all sides of the House. I said in my opening remarks that I believe very strongly that the defence of our nation should be a shared endeavour. That is always the approach that I've taken in this House, and I very much hope that it is the approach that we can continue with. I'm also grateful to him for his support for yesterday's action, as well as the cross-party consensus that I am, as I'm sure he is, genuinely proud of with regard to Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. Now, I understand why he asked about the timing of the operation, but I can say to him, and he will know this from his own time as a minister in the department, that the activity that was brilliantly and bravely executed yesterday was the result of weeks of military and operational planning. I know that he will understand very well that the UK has played a critical role in the interdiction of a number of shadow fleet ships in recent months, including through close cooperation with our US and French counterparts. And the Prime Minister, as he mentioned, made clear our intention back in March that we would interdict shadow fleet vessels at a time and place of our choosing. And that is what we chose to do. The Shadow Defence Secretary mentioned the former Minister for the Armed Forces. I was saving him up, not least because he is someone that I hold in the very highest of regard. He is an honourable, gallant member, and it is very widely recognised that he has provided outstanding service to our country in the most difficult circumstances that anyone could ever imagine. I am beyond proud that he sits on this side of the House, and I look forward to listening to him and working closely with him in the future. Now, the Shadow Secretary of State, for entirely reasonable reasons, asked me about the Defence Investment Plan. I hope, though, in what I intend to be a spirit of constructive consensus, he will recognise that this government have spent over £11 billion more this year on defence than was the case under the last year of the previous government. Now, I hope that he will also understand that colleagues across government have been working on the Defence Investment Plan for many, many months. It is a hugely important and significant piece of work. It's the first line-by-line defence budget in 20 years. Now, I fully appreciate the desire of the Shadow Defence Secretary to see the content of that published as soon as possible, and I absolutely share that desire. And since being appointed as Defence Secretary just a couple of days ago, I've been working very closely with my department and with colleagues across government to make sure that we progress this work as an absolute priority. The Prime Minister has said that we will publish this before the NATO summit next month, and we will.